What's up, everybody? Thanks for watching Built for Life. We're continuing on building this channel and our two-car garage that we're turning into a shop slash home gym. And we've already done this cabinet here for storage, making it a little bit more usable. And we're also installing dust collection. And the next thing that we're going to do is going to be build a table, a workbench, if you will. Actually, two workbenches. Um, and I knew I was going to need, obviously, some space, a big bench to work on. And I got to looking on the internet, the usual suspects. And there are frames and work tables and everything you can imagine already on the internet, ship to your house, bolt them together, buy a top, and throw that on there, and you would have a solid, workable space to work on. Wouldn't have any money left in your wallet, and it also might not exactly be what I wanted, but it would definitely work. It would definitely be an easy button, and I've never been one of those people to just click that easy button. I really get an enjoyment out of building stuff myself exactly to the specifications that I want, and typically doing it for a lot less money, leveraging tools and skills to pay for exactly what I want. And that's exactly what we're doing here today. So these next couple videos, I'm going to be building two workbenches, one very large one that is a 64 by 64 table that is going to be 48 inches high, and that is a very specific built table for a piece of equipment that's coming, and it's going to be occupied. We're also going to need a table that I can work on. Roll around on the floor, have it where I want to, use various equipment, sanding, whatever I might want to do on it. So I got to looking at all those tables, and realistically, all those frames and worktops and all that stuff are well within the capabilities of my skills to build. So the next thing came, well, how am I going to get the metal? So you go any metal supplier, and yeah, you can buy metal, all the metal, and all the metal you want, and you're going to still be up there with prices the way they are today in 2023. You're still going to be spending a ton of money. So I went and did the next best thing. I started looking for metal on Facebook Marketplace, and then it hit me. Why not just buy a shelving unit? I found this shelving unit here on Marketplace. It's 6 foot tall, 6 foot long, and 18 inches wide or so. And it has 6 of these cross members and 2 of these large uprights. And I was like, that's perfect. I was like, $60 for all that metal? Perfect. So, and then I went to a scrap metal bin and found some other metal. I found a larger pallet rack size that's 3 foot wide and 8 foot tall. So I picked that up for free, and some other shelving metal for free. And now I'm going to leverage my skill and the tools, all the money I've spent on tools, and we're going to build two giant workbenches, 64 by 64 and a 48 by 48 that will nest up underneath the 64 by 64, because you got to remember, we're in a two-car garage. We need to save space wherever we can, and 64 inches by 64 inches is a lot of space. So I need to use all that space that's up underneath it. And we've got the design, the perfect design to do just that. So come along as we get started. I'm going to disassemble, cut up into pieces, and take apart the shelving rack and use all of its parts and make a workbench. All right, eventually I'm gonna figure this thing out. This whole voiceover is kind of new to me. So here we are, just stripping those pieces of metal down, trying to get the main uprights off of them so I can cut them into legs for the table. And this takes a little while. All those cross braces are welded pretty well. All in all, this table took a good bit of grinding. The grinder is definitely the MVP of this table, and I don't know what I would have done without it. But this didn't take too terribly long. It did take a little while to clean up. I cut out a lot of that out of this video, so you didn't have to see it. But eventually I got them cut out, and I only ended up using one side of the shelves. After a little persuasion with a hammer, they all came apart, and we could get underway with cutting it up. The first thing I did was kind of square up the ends and do some measuring to figure out where I wanted everything to land, because I am bolting part of this together. So I wanted to make sure that the bolt holes fell in a really solid piece of metal, not in one of those holes used to put the cross braces on. So I squared everything up, got a good start, figured out where I wanted to cut and how long the table legs were going to be. Marked it all out, and then just went to cutting. And this made a huge mess in the garage, but no big deal. Always wear eye protection when you're doing this. Those was very loud. Hearing protection is always a plus. But those sparks fly everywhere, and they're not just sparks. Those are little bits of metal, and I can tell you firsthand, getting that in your eye is not fun. You only got two eyes, protect them. But it was a pretty quick, simple process. Take two legs, cut them short into 4. Easy day. I ended up cutting the factory pads off the bottom of these because I ended up only using 2. If I was using 4 full uprights, I probably would have kept those pads that are on the bottom that the shelf traditionally sat on. But I decided that I wanted to make my own thicker pads to bolt the casters on. So I just cut it all off. And I've switched to the die grinder. It's a electric die grinder from Harbor Freight, and it does really good. The discs are a little small, but you can be pretty precise with it. And I use that just to finish up cutting those legs down. All right, so I've got all my 4 legs cut. I'm going to continue moving on, breaking down some more metal, and I want to get all my pieces cut before I start cleaning, because I don't want to have to clean. I don't want to clean extra metal, so I'll get everything cut, all my pieces cut to size, and planned where they're going to go, and then I'll come back with a wire brush, sandpaper, and chemical, and I'll clean any of the surface rust and stuff that's on here. Grind down some of the welds left over from the structural supports that we cut out of them, and I'll get them cleaned up and ready to weld all together. All right, so the next thing here is to get the stretchers all cut up and ready, and this is a shelving bracket or a shelving unit that you would get from Lowe's. It's got like angle iron uprights with keyhole slots in it that these cross members that I'm cutting here would index into, and a shelving unit for your garage. So I'm cutting this piece up into smaller brackets. They will be turned at a 90-degree from the stretcher and go down the leg, and this is what the bolts will go through to give it a little bit more surface area.
to prevent racking. The same thing that the angle of this is going to do, it's going to ride the edge of the table leg so that it will give it some more support against lateral movement. Now here I'm taking those cross members and basically cutting the table stretchers out of the middle. These cross members have rivets on the edge that would have normally indexed into those angle iron uprights and into the keyhole slots. So I just squared everything up, measured it from the center, and cut everything to its final length. You'll count 5 here because I did 2 for the legs, sides, 2 for the stretchers, and I actually made 1 more stretcher support for lower on the frame in case there was some lateral movement in the table once it was assembled. After it was assembled, I could bolt that on and hopefully prevent any side-to-side movement or racking. And this is just a 60 grit flap disc. I'm just going through and radiusing all the corners, cleaning up all the grinded edges, trying to prevent everything from really just cutting me. And these are those down supports. I'm getting those ready to weld onto the stretchers. So I'm pre-drilling it and then drilling 4 larger holes in it because I'm going to plug weld these onto the back of the stretchers. That just prevents me from having to weld up or grind out a bunch of weld seams. I can keep the plug welds behind the metal. You'll never see them, and they're plenty strong to hold this thing together. So I'm using just a step bit here to make some bigger holes for plug welding. You can already see I've got it sanded down and all the paint grinded out so that it won't contaminate my weld. And this is just me cleaning up those holes from drilling them out. And the next thing to do is make the pads for my casters. And while I'm making these, I took those down supports outside and cleaned those up and then sprayed them with weld through primer to prevent those from corroding, because this is going to be in a garage. They are going to go through temperature changes, and eventually condensation will probably hit any bare metal and corrode it. So it's just the squaring up those little pieces onto the stretcher, and there's a good shot of it. You'll see those bolts will go through the bolts will go through the shorter piece and bolt that piece onto the legs. So I just squared everything up, spot welded it together, tacked it together real quick, and then came back later and really welded those plugs on. Welder I'm using is just an Eastwood 110 flux core welder. Flux core works just fine for as much as I weld. I had this set up on as a MIG, and I just didn't use it enough to maintain a bottle, so I switched it back over to flux core, and it does everything I needed to do. Yeah, there's a little bit more cleanup, and the welds aren't as pretty, but it gets the job done. And this is the third one that I'm welding up here. So I got 2 up top that bolt the legs together, and then this is the third one that I'm welding here. Just in case there was some racking, I would be able to bolt it down closer to the ground. Now these are the leg assemblies. I'm just welding the stretcher straight to the legs and basically creating a leg assembly. These will be the sides. And I used, you'll see me come in from the bottom here to weld those. I'm just trying to keep that that weld bead hidden so it's less to clean up. There's already enough grinding on this table with the used metal, so I didn't want to add any more if I didn't have to. So after getting that all tacked together, I put a lower support down a little bit further down the legs, and once I got everything finished welded, clamped it all together, squared it up, and then I ended up bolting or drilling all the bolt holes as it's assembled here and assembling it, making sure everything went together well. And what I'm using was a 3/8 bolt with a nylock nut and washers on both sides. That nylon lock nut just prevents everything from backing out. So pre-drill it and then do the final size. I ended up doing 3 bolts on each leg, and then it was time for disassembly, and yep, more wire brushing and sanding. I don't know if it all equaled out, the money I saved on metal versus the time I put in on cleaning all this metal up. I'd like to think it did. You know, saved me money, cost me time. You know, I guess it's all dependent on your value of your time. But I had some time to burn, and doing things for cheaper always makes me feel better. So here I'm just hitting it with some 120 grit, cleaning up all the areas where I'd welded and the old paint had bubbled up. This is going to be a work table, so I'm not super concerned with blocking this thing out and making it amazing showroom quality. But I did do enough to make sure all the processes for primer and paint were adhered to, because I don't want the paint bubbling up and peeling off, you know, a couple months down the road. So I did sand everything down really well before priming the entire thing with some Rust-Oleum primer. And this is the cross member that I ended up never even using. I mean, we're months down the road now and I haven't even bolted that thing on because there ended up being no racking in the table. It's super sturdy. I've even used it to stand on and do something up on the garage door. So maybe this was a little bit of a waste of time, but you know, if I hadn't have built it, it would have moved and shook all over the place, and I would have wished I had built one. So, but I did want the you know, front and back clear. That way I could would be able to roll it around and roll it over the top of stuff. Just prevent me from having to move everything out of the way if I wanted to move it out. I can just keep the vacuum or whatever else I have parked underneath it, you know, and just roll it over the top. Now it's time to weld the pads on for the casters, and this is the best way I figured to do it. Square it up with a bubble level, do some safety squints, and tack it in place. And then as soon as I got it all tacked up and squared up, I came back and finished welding it from the inside of that channel. Kept the weld on the inside of the channel there again, just to keep from having to clean up more welds. Now after everything's cleaned up, time for primer. And here I was planning on this big color reveal, and I learned one of the first lessons of being a YouTuber, and that's yeah, make sure you have memory left on your camera. So here it is, blue. I think it's a safety, Rust-Oleum safety blue or something like that. I don't know. It looks good with the white tabletop. And this is final assembly. This is the left and right leg assemblies. And I'll eventually get the stretchers and just bolt those in. So the leg assemblies will be the left and right side, and the stretchers across the top will be the front and back, leaving a pass through all the way through the table. I wasn't really sure if 3 bolts was going to be enough. It ended up being plenty, especially with that. I think the nylon lock nut is key. I think they work a lot better. A little bit more expensive, but definitely work better. I actually learned my lesson on this one too. Going to Lowe's and wasting a bunch of time looking through bin after bin after bin. I think the best way to do it, and what I ended up doing on the second table, was using online hardware store. I think it was bolts.com, and just figured out the size of everything that I need, ordered online, and an entire box of everything you need just gets shipped to your house. They're not a sponsor or anything. Definitely have no sponsors. But it was a pretty good experience using those guys, as opposed to like going to Lowe's or Home Depot or whatever big box store you have around you, and trudging through their bins trying to find the right size, and they never keep those things organized well. And now just tightening everything up, final assembly. Bolted all these legs together, squared everything up on the tabletop, and pre-drilled and used 1-inch lag bolts through the stretchers into the tabletop, and held it together really well. And there it is. I didn't really talk about the tabletop, but it is one sheet of melamine cut in half to 48 by 48, and then screwed together to make it 1.5 inches thick. So the only problem with that is it leaves this ugly edge. So if you watch my last video, or the video of the cabinets, talked about edge banding, and this is just 2-inch wide edge banding that I purchased off of Amazon. Super simple to put on. All you need is an iron and to heat it up and iron it on. The aluminum foil is just to protect the iron from directly hitting the plastic and melting and getting the iron dirty. Realistically, it's to protect me from from my wife and destroying the iron. But this stuff is super simple. The glue bubbles up and squeezes into the grain of the wood and holds on really well. This is sped up right here, but this is actual speed right here. You go really slow, and basically what I'm doing is I left the top of the edge banding a little proud of the surface, and I'm just watching that edge to make sure that the glue is getting hot enough and squeezing out as you go along. You can actually see it kind of just like bubble up from the edge, and at that point you know it's getting into the grain of the edge grain of that wood. And as you go along here, you'll see some little chips in that melamine. I don't think you can use melamine without getting some sort of chips in it. You know, maybe somebody can, but I definitely haven't found the magic trick to that. So the edge banding covers up a lot of it, but for everything else, I use this JB Weld white marine epoxy. It's like a 5-minute epoxy. Mix it up really well, and then my tool of choice to spread that out is just a regular razor blade. Allows you to really squeeze stuff into the cracks and get it where you want it without getting too much everywhere. And then when I was welding this assembly up, I burnt through the cover and burnt this hole in it. So I drilled it out, threw some 5-minute epoxy in there, and boom.
All right, that's it. 48 by 48 inch roll around assembly table complete. All in all, it cost, including everything, hardware, paint, metal, top, edge banding, it cost $260 for the whole table. And so far, I think that's a bargain. We'll visit that in another video once I get the Big Brother table built, 64 by 64 inch. If you want to see that build, you can click this link. If you like what you saw, consider hitting that subscribe button. If you didn't like what you saw, tell me about it in the comments. And we'll see you on the next one.